Good morning, and welcome to today's Moss Adams webcast, Navigate the Future of Work, Strategies for 2025 and Beyond. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Moss Adams webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter from Moss Adams, Brett Addis, Director. And with that, I will pass it over to Brett to get us started.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We got a great group of people who are joining us today. And I got a lot of really great information. So let me start out by introducing myself, and we'll dive into some of the standard abstract agenda, all this stuff, and then we can get into some of the content. So my name is Brett Addis. I'm a director at Moss Adams. I lead our human capital advisory practice. I've been in the HR space for human capital or workforce, however you want to call it, for just about 30 years, and really have sat across all aspects of the employee life cycle, from working directly within HR, and my last role was a VP of HR, to getting into management consulting focused on HR, which I'm doing today, as well as worked across a lot of technologies. And my last role was with SAP, leading their global customer transformation office. So been around a long time and have seen a lot of changes taking place year over year. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all as we talk a little bit about what happened in 2024 and where we are going in terms of 2025. So let's dive into this. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. I think this was in the abstract, but year over year, and this has happened way before COVID. We have been seeing major changes year over year as it relates to workforce. A number of those things, we looked at one, moving into technology, two, looking at how we improve process efficiency from an HR and employee experience perspective. Now we're diving into things around challenges with engagement, retention, all of those areas. And then as we continue to move into 2025, it's really the big question is how mature are HR organizations or organizations themselves to really start taking these leaps to get into some of these emerging trends like AI, predictive analytics, things like that. Interestingly enough, we've been talking about these things for years. What I think is where really the rubber meets the road is, our organizations, to my point earlier, are they mature enough and ready enough to actually take this leap? And I think one of the things that we'll spend a good bit of time on today is, not only about taking the leap and what leaps you need to take, but what happens if you don't take those leaps. There's still massive amounts of talent demand out there, and we are seeing a decrease in talent supply, especially in some very specific skills. And if organizations don't begin to shift their perception of what workforce means and what workforce does, then we're going to see some organizations rise to the top and other ones not so much. Before I get in here into diving into this deep, though, I had a question for the participants, and the winner of this question will get an hour discussion with me, whether you want it or not. But it will make it as fun as you want. But here are the two questions that I'd be interested in seeing you guys know. So there were two big announcements that came out in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Both of them I posted on LinkedIn. They are not legal changes, although we're going to see tons of those coming, and we can get into those in a different time, and compliance changes. But the first one was for the first time in 10 years, organizations across all industries have hit a record low of what? If you could go ahead and put that in the Q&A. I know it's for Q&A, but you could just answer the question. And then the second question I had is, and maybe you can't put them in. Yep, there's one. Oh, and close. And here's the other astonishing one. And when I read this, I literally had to read it, think at least 3 times to make sure I read it right. The question was, for the first time in 10 years, we have hit a record low of what? And someone actually stuck it in the question or in the answer. And that was, I'm just going to call out your name. I hope you don't mind, is Kate Yarhouse. It is engagement. You're right. So we have seen a decline in engagement, employee engagement, consistently over the past 10 years. A lot of people can attribute this to COVID. A lot of people attribute to this, that, but the reality is that this is across all levels of the organization and across all different industries. And engagement has reached its all-time low level. We'll talk a little bit about that today and some mitigations actions to take. The second question I had for you all is, and Teresa, this actually goes to your answer, but not 100%. And Josette, I love your answer of wine consumption. I would say wine and other alcoholic consumption is probably the right answer for that. The second one is, this is for the first time in 20 years, something overtook compensation as the number one reason for an employee to join a company, or the value proposition of joining a company, I should say. I know I'm throwing these out at you, but it's interesting to get your points of view. Oh, we got to respond. Oh, culture, Kristen, close. Work from home, Brenda, even closer. Flex time, Jennifer, you're almost right there. You're right. It's work-life balance. You're exactly right. So we're seeing a bunch of those popping in. So awesome. So these, again, if you think about these two trends, we've been talking about engagement forever, and we have been talking about work-life balance more and more since the COVID and post-COVID era. But the reality is these are now becoming like aha moments where we've got to do something. We'll talk about this in a minute, and I mentioned this earlier. Like, we are at a record. We're also seeing a huge decrease in talent supply right now, and a major increase in competitive differentiators from one organization to another. And we're hearing from people that we're unhappy and that pay is no longer a major factor. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go into this. So without further ado, and thank you all for participating in my ad hoc questions. It's good to see that you're paying attention. So a couple outcomes of this session. Definitely, we're going to discuss some workforce and HR trends. We're going to talk about some of the key priorities for 2025, and then we'll talk about how to mitigate some of those. Now, just a level set on this. guys, if you go out and do a Google search or whatever search for HR trends, you're going to get a list of about 100 different things, and I would love to tell you that I could cover all 100 of them. The reality is I've really tried to boil them down based on research to really those ones that matter the most. And are the biggest priorities for a lot of organizations out there. So you might say, hey, I'm missing this. I probably will miss a lot of them. But these are the ones that we've really seen in terms of most important. So let's just dive into those. So the first one is economic and organizational adaptability. So this is really talking about based on all of the social, economic, global changes. How are organizations adapting to the different models? So whether that's organizational structure, whether that's hiring changes, whether that's insource, outsource, whether that's reduction in force, whether that's growth. That's really what that's talking about, is all of the different factors that are coming at us. How are we adapting it? Well, I'm not going to get into the political stuff, so I'm going to skip what I was going to say. The second is around digital technology and digital transformation. Again, this is one we've been talking about for some time. And this gets down specifically for HR around how do we do three things. One is how do we create more efficient and effective processes that drive value to the business, which means how do we do more with less, and how do those actions equate to better tangible measurements like time to productivity, time to efficiencies, lower cost of hiring, all of those different things. Could be decrease in benefits, and we could go on and on about different KPIs, and then the digital transformation aspect piece, which is I had a session about this last year around what's the difference between digital transformation and I actually don't remember what it was, but it really was around defining what digital transformation was. A digital transformation is not actually necessarily a technology change. In many instances, it's a mindset change in the way organizations need to work through the adoption of technology. Right. And again, we've been talking about that a lot, but this gets back to one of the points I made earlier on is, technology and digital transformation for many companies, especially mid-size or smaller based companies. Number one, it takes a pretty large financial commitment, takes resources to manage these things. And often, there's a sense of maturity and being able to actually implement these things and be competitive. And so there are challenges with this, but as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be an opportunity where, it's not a nice to have anymore. Now it's a must have. And then the third area is really around employee-centric culture. We saw a lot of this. We talked about it, in one of my questions. It's what matters most to employees. We're seeing work-life balance outpace compensation. We're seeing the need for more community and collaborative-based working styles, which, if you think about it, that's how they educate many students in universities today. Where I know when I went, it was, hey, here's your assignment, go do it. Now it's, hey, here's your assignment, here's your team, go do it. So there's a lot of changes in the way that organizations need to think about working to adapt to the new and next generations of the workforce. And a lot of this gets back into, the technology and efficiency and the right skills and all those other things. So I'm going to dive into each one of these a little bit more specifically, share some benchmarks behind these, and then we'll work our way through. If I go a little bit fast, we've got 45 minutes. So I'm always happy to hop on calls and discuss this in more detail. So for economic and organizational adaptability, we covered some of these things, right? We talked about workforce resizing, whether you're whether you're doing reduction in force or whether you're doing growth. Reskilling of employees it was a big last year. It's going to continuously refocus on 2025. And frankly, I don't see this trend stopping. And basically, for those of you who are saying, of course we hire skilled people. Let me kind of unpack what this basically means. There's a big philosophy going around now that's really saying, hey, is it education or is it skill? And can I train skill over education? So I think we all know people, even myself. I graduated with a pre-law degree. I got into HR. Yes, there's some correlation, but the question is, why didn't you become a lawyer? Well, I went into HR. Why? Because I had different skills and capabilities that I felt leaned more towards HR. Well, if we look at the population today, many of you, the question is, I got all these great degrees, but what am I doing with them? Or we have all of these people out there that we actually have tangible skills, but we're not upskilling them to gain better skills and capabilities, whether that's trade skills, whether that's professional skills. And so there's a big question right now, right? Like, do I need that 4-year degree? Maybe not. I mean, some instances I say absolutely, and others I'd say probably not. So reskilling is really around us thinking about our workforce and workforce needs of the future, and asking ourselves, can we upskill these people or reskill these people to do new and different things? It also means, do we need to hire people differently with different skills? We talked about hybrid working environments, and yes, and this will be sent out. Or I will make sure you get it, but I think everyone will get it. Hybrid work environments, again, I think you all are familiar with that. It's really around not only allowing our workers to work in a hybrid manner, it's also around building up the infrastructure to allow our workers to work from home or different places. So this is also going to continuously be big. This is a little bit controversial, I'll tell you. We're seeing a lot of big companies say you need to return to work, and you need to return to work by when. I don't think we're all just being totally transparent. I don't think we're hearing about the ramifications so much of those mandates being put in place. And I think we'll probably hear more of that on LinkedIn and Glassdoor and other areas. But I still think that based on these number one areas of work-life balance, organizations are going to have to think, is that really the right decision? And for some companies it might be, and for other companies it may not. And then the last piece really gets into balancing productivity and employee satisfaction. And so, again, this is really looking at all of these economic factors, the new policies, all of these things coming out and saying, do we really have what we need to keep our employees satisfied, based on all of these different HR programs. And so there's a lot going on in this, and we could unpack this for hours. Just really quick, I mentioned to you all a statistic. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you can see in the far right, basically the SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, did some analysis and studies, and they're basically predicting that we're going to have 1.7 million fewer individuals compared to February 2020. So it's a pretty big drop, right? And my assumption is most of those are aging workforce and retirees. And if you want to put that into perspective, that's a lot of knowledge share walking out your door that you may or may not ever get back, right? So now is the time to really focus on especially coaching and mentoring and finding the right development programs to get your staff where they need to be. I'm not going to go through this just based on time and depth. You will get this, but I do think it's interesting is if you look across these various areas, there's some percentages here, and I'll just hit on a couple of them. But really, the major focus of 2024 was really on resizing and streamlining workforce. The other ones were kind of in parity between 20 and 25%, reskilling, hybrid, et cetera. I think the workforce resizing, I don't think it's going to stop. I think we're going to continue to see that moving forward, especially over the next couple of years. A lot of consolidations happening. There's a lot of startups, probably more startups than we've ever had before, and a lot of great startups. And I think the question is how are we looking at really bringing all of these unique skills together? And frankly, I think there's a lot of global competition out there, international competition, that's forcing us to really rethink how we do some of this business to make organizations more efficient and effective, and less focus on competing against one another. Not that I don't disagree with competition. I just think we're going to see a lot of these companies with skills starting to ask the question, if we start coming together, we can probably be a lot more powerful and a lot more impactful. And have a much higher bottom line. So let's jump into technology and digital transformation. So I touched on this a little bit. I touched on all of these, frankly, a little bit earlier, but AI and automation was a big buzzword last year. I'll tell you a really funny story. I had an opportunity to go to the HR Tech Conference this year. I don't know if any of you had a chance to go, but basically it's one of the largest HR technology conferences in the world. And there was a kind of a joke out there because every banner with a software had the word AI on it. Hey, we do AI integration, all these things. But when you actually ask them, show me how the AI works, it was really just an overlay of things that they've always done. Now it's just AI. But with that said, I think that the question here is that AI is at the forefront of everyone's minds in terms of how will it make us work differently moving forward, or how can it make us work differently in the future. So I don't fault them for their promotion. I do fault them a little bit for the lack of capability, but I think this is an area where we're going to see them and others really start to penetrate organizations in a variety of ways. From an HR perspective, I actually wrote an article on this, so I'm not going to go into detail. There's tons of different ways that you can leverage AI, and I don't think it's about AI replacing others. I think it's about training others to analyze what AI is producing, and you need someone to be able to tell AI what to do. So this isn't a lack of eliminating positions with knowledge and skills. It's really around upskilling, which we talked about last time, the right skills to manage these tools effectively. Employee experience platforms were pretty major last year. We're going to continue to see them grow. Just for an example, employee experience platform, whether you want to call it an HRIS, whether you want to call it a rewards and recognitions platform, it's really looking at how we deliver better end-to-end experience across the life cycle of the employee, from job posting and sourcing all the way through exit interviews and alumni, frankly. There's a lot of really interesting tools coming out. The main purpose of this is really twofold, right? Just to kind of boil this down for you, is one, it's a key differentiator. Do you want to go work for someone who it takes you 6 hours to apply online, or do I just hit click LinkedIn or whatever that button is, links your LinkedIn profile, and there's a very efficient, and the process runs very smoothly, and a lot of frequent communication and all of these things, or do you want to have to go in and upload your resume for 6 hours and wait and never hear responses, this and that? But this even carries through, right, to like continuous feedback from your employee manager or peer-to-peer recognition. It also stems even beyond that. And I think this is one of the areas that people don't get, is we've got a mass amount, this kind of talked about this in a minute, a mass amount of skills that are retiring, right? And why don't we leverage them as an alumni network and use these employee platforms to gather those skills and capabilities and their profiles and their needs and their wants, and leverage them for part-time or contract labor, and create our own levels of pools, but we still can communicate with them and all of these other things. It's a massive opportunity to really start looking at recapitalizing differently on our supply, right? Our talent supply. Hybrid work and enablement. Again, I talked about there, so I'm going to skip that. And then learning and development technologies. I want to hit this really quickly. So historically, and again, learning is, for some reason, is always the first area to get cut within an organization, but then is always the most needed, whether that's compliance training, whether that's things like safety training, or that's actually employee development. And so in 2024, the question really was around, listen, we've got talent gaps, we've got skill gaps, we need systems in place, we need platforms in place that can really make sure that we're upskilling and meeting the requirements of compliance in a way that we can track, manage, and report on. And so you're going to see some big changes in learning platforms and technologies. You're going to see a lot more integrations between training and experience platforms, training and AI, development and these core HR systems, because we're seeing, and again, this isn't just a lack of skill in terms of gaps that we don't have. We're actually seeing a major gap of skill in the current employees. One of the biggest areas that we're seeing gaps in is leadership. There was a study done last year. I think, and don't fact check me on this, but I think it was something like 90% of CEOs did not feel that they had the direct line of successors within their organization to take the company over. That's a really scary thought. And so the question is do you have the right leaders in your organization? Are they, I'm not going to get into all that, but this is another big area I think that you need to look at. Is not only about upskilling skill-based labor, it's about upskilling your professional and leadership labor as well, because they take an equally important role in the success of your organization. All right, again, I'm not going to go through the statistics. You guys can read these when you get the slide, but it's just interesting, right? As you go through these, what I will say really quick on this is, again, the major prioritization in AI, which, from my opinion, organizations dipped their toe in this. There wasn't a major lift, but look at where they spent less of their time: learning and development, ready now workforce. So the question is are we trying to leverage AI to replace or automate some of those skills? Possibly and probably. And should they be? Absolutely. But on the flip side, we're not elevating our people to make sure that we've got those right skills to use AI and use other platforms effectively. Otherwise, again, it's like you can implement the best system or AI in the world, but if you don't have the right skills to use it or understand it or read it and analyze it, it's not really that effective. Claire says, I know there's a bunch of questions coming in. Claire, are there certain industries that are seeing bigger dip up and down in leaders? Great question. Based on our research, it's all. It's across the board. I think one of the major challenges, Claire, is that this is the old, and I hate to use this, but how many people have been really good individual contributors and been promoted into manager and leadership roles that aren't really good leaders? They're really good at what they do, but they're not really good with people. And so I think what we're starting to see now is that people don't want people who are really good at what they do. People want people who can motivate them, coach them, guide them, have empathy with them, can what's the word I'm looking for? Motivate them, through actions. And I'm not saying that a leader shouldn't be able to do the task, but I do think that leaders should be able to really focus a lot of time on coaching. Would hiring retirees for part-time or sporadic work negatively impact their taxes? Rose, I am not an accountant. I am a HR person. So I'm not going to answer that question, but I can provide I will get someone to provide an answer to you for that. So let's definitely keep that. And then Rose, you had another question. What are the top 3 emerging skills in your opinion that will be needed? So really quick on those, I do think leadership capabilities are number one. We're seeing, as I mentioned, we're seeing a major slip in having good, robust leaders, not people who can do the job, but people who can actually manage people, who are influencers, motivators, coaches, mentors, etc. So I think that's skill number one. I think skill number 2, when we get down to the next couple layers, I think AI is going to be a major, and I don't want to limit to AI. I would say AI and technology skills themselves are going to be massive, especially when you get into one of the items that I skipped over, which was predictive analytics. And I skipped over it, not necessarily intentionally, but to me, that's a very specific skill: is how do I read and understand and then articulate what data means in a meaningful way to the business. So they can look at this and say, our turnover is X, our cost per hire is X, our recruiting cost ratio is X, our benefit costs are X. If we did these things, we could, I think that, or looking at it in terms of predictive analytics. So saying, hey, based on the market trends, we're seeing X, Y, and Z, this is what this could be for us, whether that's numbers or dollars. I don't think there's a lot of solid people out there that can do that in a meaningful way. Not saying they can't take the numbers and data and read it and understand it. It's also the articulation of that. So I think that's I think that's number two. I think the third thing really gets down to, and this is going to be a hard one to answer, which is really around looking at the baseline skills and capabilities across the organization and really building those skills to that future need. I feel like we build needs for now. We don't build needs for 2 and 3 years out. And then we're always rushing. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily an emerging skill. I would say it's really more of an emerging approach. So I hope that was helpful, and happy to take it offline. And Jennifer just sent me a quick note, and I'm going to read it. I'm trying to answer these with Go because I think it's easier. Is the real issue leadership? Today's boomer CEOs are looking for successors like them, often top-down leadership, missing that they are leader success, just different leadership styles. I think that's part of it, Jennifer. I also think that it gets back to, we promote people that we like and we promote people that do well. It's not necessarily we're promoting people who are meeting the needs of the organization. And I think those are two very different things. We promote people, again, this gets back to the skill. Are we training people for tomorrow? Are we training people for 3 years? Are we hiring a leader to solve a problem for tomorrow? Are we hiring a leader to solve a problem or problems they're going to come over the next 3 years, whether that's people problems, business problems, whatever. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think it's really around, we have a very myopic view in what we mean and define as leadership. And I don't think we do good enough job at really saying this is the future need, not the tomorrow need. That's my opinion. All right, employee-centric culture, all of this kind of wrapped into a lot of what we were talking about. So I'm not going to spend much time here because we only have about 15 minutes left. I do want to touch on a couple, though. We talked about health, mental health and well-being programs. I don't want to dismiss these. These were really big focus in 2024 and are continuously going to be a big focus, especially based on the trend of the well-being, right, or the work-life balance. So that's going to continue on. Diversity, equity, inclusion, awesome program, still needs to continue on. I'm not getting political in any of this. I'm just saying, me as an individual, as I look at talent, I want to understand the diversity of talent out there and the diversity of skills and capabilities. And to me, it's less about quotas. It's more about hiring the right people to solve our future business problems. And if you want to measure that and tweak that, whatever you want to do is fine. But without that level of diversity, and I would say diversity is also about thinking, right? Yes, it's color, gender, but it's also about diversity of thinking. Are we hiring people who are thinking different to help us move forward? And so that to me is, I think, going to be a huge focus moving forward as AI and some of these other tools really start to knock on our door about changing the way we work. So the one we talked about engagement earlier, so you guys know this. The other one I want to touch on really quickly is employer value proposition. I am huge on this. I started my career in actually recruiting. And for those of you who don't know what an employer value proposition is, it's basically your promise to a candidate or new hire, for intensive purposes, of the experience they're going to get when they come work for you. And it's your ability to articulate the value proposition of them working. So, for example, if you go to a website today and you go to LinkedIn, it says, hey, come work for us. We offer medical insurance, 401k, 3 or 4 things. Is that really that intriguing? No, it's really not. Because you know what? Every other site offers the same thing. You could also say, hey, we got the best culture in the world. every company is going to say we have the best culture in the world. But what are those things that you are investing in your people, which I call either monetary or non-monetary, that most people don't know about? Do you offer career development stipends? Do you offer childcare? Do you offer free parking? Do you offer transportation services? Do you offer, it could be, the list goes on, executive coaching, right? It could be a lot of things that you as an organization offer to the employee that you're not asking, they're not going in the payroll, right? You're not asking them to contribute anything. That's employer value proposition. It's also about leadership. It's about, I don't want to dismiss culture because it's big, but everyone says their culture is the best. What makes your culture the best? And I think this is a major hit that organizations have not focused on in the last 10 to 15 years, which is why when I talk to clients, we have such a hard time hiring. And I say, let me look at your job descriptions. Let me look at your job posting. Tell me, CEO, tell me why I should work for you. And they say, we got great benefits. We do this. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't work for you. So why would anybody else work for you? You got to have a clear value statement in terms of the why. Robert says, your DEI paragraph discusses representation, belonging, equity, not skill set experience. That approach has proven not to work, especially for small and mid-size businesses. Again, Robert, I think the diversity, equity, inclusion to me is really looking at a broad set of skills, capabilities, regardless of race, gender, etc. And understanding that different businesses work in different ways. It's really about, hiring and having the right talent regardless, right, to meet those future needs. And so I'm happy to talk to you about this more offline if you want. Frankly, you might be saying a little bit of the same things, but yeah. All right, let me keep going. Again, not going to spend a lot of time here. You guys can see this. I think just quick highlights, 60% focus on employer value proposition, which is interesting because if you think about all the talent needs and difficulty hiring, major issues. So of course we need to focus on our value. But look at the bottom one, mental health and well-being, but isn't that what everyone's asking for? So again, just some things to think about as we shift our mindset and our strategies to 2025. All right, real quick poll. What are your 2024 workforce and talent focuses? And we're not going to spend a ton of time here, so if you don't mind responding pretty quickly, we can move on because I don't have a lot of time left. This is a lot of content. And let's see. I'm hovering. Oh, some of you guys are answering there. Somebody, I agree with me. Yeah, thanks for totally agree. I think we're saying the same thing, and again, I think every organization is a little bit different, and I think you have to make the right determination of what your talent, skill set, and need is. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Finding talent, learning and team building activities. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide, even though some of you guys are responding. This will give us a good pulse. So 41% of you had shared. I know we got a lot in the chat. Employee-centric culture, completely agree with you. I think that's an all-encompassing term. 26.2% on tech and digital transformation. I'd be interested, I'm not calling anyone out, but is the reason there is a low focus on it because you've already done it? Or is it just, hey, I'm just really not there and I'm not mature enough to move forward? So you don't have to answer that if you don't want. You can send me a note later. I'm just curious. And then the economic and organizational debt. But, the 30%, I think to me, this is what I would have expected here is kind of a mid-range answer. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And frankly, there's a lot of unknowns. And so this number isn't overly surprising to me, but I do love the employee-centric focus. I think it's going to be, as we talked about, really critical. All right, I'm going to continue to move on. So 2025. So there are 5 major things that we're starting to see really surface. Again, some of these are a bit repetitive. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of them. I'm really going to hit the ones that we haven't addressed already. But the 5 ones are really AI and workforce augmentation. So remember, last one was AI and automation. This is AI and workforce augmentation. So this is now getting into how do we leverage AI and technology to augment workers. Before it was to automate and streamline. Now we're augmenting. Okay, so pretty major difference in definition. The second, skills-based hiring, no surprise. We saw the decrease in level of workers from SHRM. It's only going to continue to get worse. And I think this is a massive opportunity for you all to really sit down and start asking yourself the question is, what skills do I need today, tomorrow? And when I mean tomorrow, meaning 12 months from now and 2 to 3 years. Doesn't mean you need to post the job for 3 years, but what it maybe you do. But what it does do is it gives you a different line of sight into some of the skills and capabilities. And I could tell you some stories there, but we won't have time today. Redefining leadership, we talked a bunch about that. Employee experience, we touched on that earlier with the employee experience platforms. Those are going to continue to grow. And there's a new one that popped up, which is sustainability and ESG alignment, which we will touch on. All right, so AI and workforce augmentation. Again, I only have a couple minutes, guys, so I'm going to skip through some of these. You will get these slides. I rambled on enough about them. There are some really great statistics in here. Just want to touch on one. I think if you saw on the last AI slide, there was a quote, I think it was by SHRM, that only 7% of organizations, I don't remember, I think it was adopted AI or started to adopt AI. By 2025, we're looking at about 65% of organizations are adopting AI tools. Again, that doesn't mean that AI is going to come in and run your organization. What that means is we're adopting tools to make us better, efficient, and effective, right? So just something to think about. So I don't want you to think that we're going to have a bunch of robots running around, although some of you may, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's definitely not going to take over. Skills-based hiring. I think one of the things I want to touch base on here, I alluded to it earlier, is remember skills aren't just upward. And I think a lot of people forget that, right? There's a lot of what we call lattice models, which is how do we train people, whether even though it's not a promotion, it could be cross-functional role or parallel roles to them, that we're still upskilling those training because we need to make sure that we are able to fulfill specific needs back and forth based on how the market's going. I see a lot of organizations do that very well. I see a lot of organizations do that horribly. A lot of organizations think of development as only upward. So that's a definite opportunity for you to think about, if you're not doing it today, is really look at more of a lattice-based approach. Redefining leadership, I'm going to skip here. Actually, this looks very similar to the last one, so I'm not sure what happened to that slide. So I'll get the updated slide for you and put that in because this is the wrong one anyways. But we talked a lot about that. Again, I think continuous focus on coaching, mentoring, guiding, really being there as someone for an employee to not only listen to, but provide right direction in terms of not only their career, but specific tasks and opportunities, and give them those opportunities that they need. Employee experience, again, we talked a lot about this. I think you're going to continue to see an uplift here, especially in the rewards and recognition space. Very powerful, drives a lot of value to companies, increases productivity tremendously, as well as engagement and all of these other things. So definitely something that you're going to continue to see. Now, in 1 minute, I think, sustainability and ESG. I'm just going to, touch on this quote here for a second. That by 2025, 70% of organizations will link workforce strategies with sustainability goals, with measure impacts of employee engagement, brand reputation, et cetera. We're already seeing this a lot in the energy space. What we're not seeing is this in a lot of the other spaces. Somewhat in the utilities, but definitely a major opportunity when you start thinking about how you're tying your ESG to your workforce initiatives, whether that's setting ESG-based goals at all levels, whether that's thinking differently of how you're working and the way you're working and the tools that you're using. Can you be more green in certain circumstances? So I just think there's a lot, as well as hires, right? I mean, that's also a pretty big cultural mindset shift of moving to more of an ESG-based focus. So major issue here, I think, out of all of those, this is probably one of the major areas that we see are going to be focused on. Again, not applicable to all organizations or heavily applicable, but definitely something to consider and applicable. All right. I don't have time for, I think I'm getting a chat. Let me see what my guys are saying. I think we're saying we're almost done, or we are done. So I'm going to skip this poll, and because you will get this, and I'm going to skip the call to action because you all can read, but I would just say this is a massive opportunity for your organizations to really take a step back before you take a step forward. Really understand your level of readiness, really understand your level of maturity, understand the organization's 3 to 5 year objectives from a workforce perspective. Stop focusing on tomorrow and really spending the opportunity on focusing on the next couple of years. I think we are good. I do get a question. Rose, thank you very much. And I am happy to schedule some more time with you. And any of you, if you're interested, we can schedule a deeper dive. So thank you all. I know we're 1 minute over. You will get this presentation. This won't be the last time you hear from me. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett, for a great presentation today. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we will do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey as your feedback is very important to us. Please also visit mossadams.com for future webcasts and other resources to help elevate our performance upward. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Yes, Steve, if you're still on, the slides will be sent.